Interestingly, there is a 10th century Arabic manuscript cited by Shlomo Pines of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem back in 1972. Here's how it reads. At this time there was a wise man who was called Jesus, and his conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous, and many people from among the Jews and other nations became his disciples. Pilate condemned him to be crucified and to die, and those who had become his disciples did not abandon his discipleship. They reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion and that he was alive. Accordingly, he was perhaps the Messiah concerning whom the prophets have recounted wonders. So as you can see, this passage is much more neutral, but it still tells us a lot about Jesus. Most historians believe that this version is likely closer to the original text of Josephus, and even the skeptical New Testament scholar Bart Ehrman says the majority of scholars of early Judaism and experts on Josephus think that one or more Christian scribes touched up the passage a bit.
Everything that he just said ignores the work of Alice Whealey, who conclusively proved that all existing versions of the Testimonium Flavianum, including the Arabic and Syriac versions, all ultimately stem from Eusebius in the 4th century. Between 220 CE and 320 CE, the Testimonium Flavianum seems to just pop into existence out of nowhere, almost like somebody just inserted this passage into Josephus's work. Now, Whealey does go on to suggest this highly convoluted way that Josephus could have written the Testimonium Flavianum as it exists now. But just because she's wrong in her conclusion should not detract from the fact that she conclusively proves that all extant versions of the Testimonium Flavianum ultimately stem from Eusebius's version. Also, Alice Whealey's findings were published in 2008, which makes Eric's video here 13 years out of date with the academic research. This video and the subsequent blog post was posted on Thursday, February 4th, 2021. There is literally no excuse for this other than just simply ignoring the evidence.
So, problem solved, right? Well, not quite. Still, some claim the passage is a total fabrication. Why is that? There are 5 main arguments raised by the fringe scholars who don't think Jesus ever existed.
Now, I'm not sure what 5 arguments he's managed to gather, but I do want to present the most defensible position against the authenticity of the Testimonium Flavianum. As we've already shown with Alice Whealey's work, the original Testimonium Flavianum that most likely existed is the ones with the very non-Jewish phrases contained in it. This already makes it highly unlikely that Josephus would have written it. You can also look at Paul Hopper's work in A Narrative Anomaly in Josephus, where he establishes 1. The Testimonium Flavianum uses finite verbs in a very different way than Josephus does elsewhere in his writing. 2. The Testimonium Flavianum uses oblique and passive language to insert Pilate into this passage, which is completely contradictory to how Josephus inserts Pilate into his work in the surrounding passages. 3. The Testimonium Flavianum has a completely different time organization than all of the surrounding passages. 4. The Testimonium Flavianum seems to be absent of a plot, which is completely contradictory to all of the passages surrounding this passage. And finally, 5. The Testimonium Flavianum would only make sense to Christians. G.J. Goldberg has established a link between the Testimonium and the Emmaus Road story in Luke's Gospel. There are 19 parallels in both of these works. It's not just the fact that the parallels exist, it's the fact that these parallels exist in the exact same order in both works. This makes coincidence highly unlikely and dependence highly likely. Ken Olson has also established multiple parallels in both language and content between Eusebius and the Testimonium Flavianum. This coincides with the fact that the Testimonium seems to pop into existence right around the time Eusebius was the caretaker of the library that Josephus's work was contained in. Louis Feldman has also come to the conclusion that a Christian like Eusebius most likely wrote the Testimonium Flavianum. Phrases such as wise man, worker of amazing deeds, teacher of human beings, and Christian tribe are used by Eusebius to describe both Jesus and Christians, but are otherwise unused in the rest of Josephus's work outside of the Testimonium. Additionally, The Testimonium fails to even describe what it means to be a Christian, which is very uncharacteristic of Josephus, considering that he does it for all of the other sects he mentions. One common way that you can test for an interpolation is to take the passage or phrase out of the context in which it appears. If the surrounding text seems to flow seamlessly together, then it may have been interpolated. This is exactly the case for the Testimonium, because the paragraph prior to this flows seamlessly into the paragraph after it with the Testimonium removed. Finally, as stated before, the Testimonium Flavianum seems to pop into existence between the 3rd and 4th centuries. Origen had ample reason to quote this passage from Josephus because Origen regularly quotes Josephus. In fact, no other pagan or Christian scholar mentions this passage prior to Eusebius in the 4th century. Normally, just because somebody doesn't talk about it doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't there, unless other people had ample reason to talk about it. In the case of the Testimonium Flavianum, we definitely have ample reason for other people to quote it if it existed prior to the 4th century. This mountain of evidence leads us to the conclusion that either Eusebius or his predecessor Pamphilus inserted the Testimonium Flavianum into Josephus's work using Luke's Gospel and the Emmaus Road story in order to generate the skeletal structure for the Testimonium. Alright, let's see how Eric thinks we argue against the Testimonium Flavianum.